The atmosphere at the Civil Affairs Bureau was solemn. Even the air seemed to stay still, frozen by the importance of the moment. "Do you, Marco Vost, take Alan Thorn to be your husband?" "I do." The voice was deep, like a low rumble that carried effortlessly through the room. Although pleasant to hear, it was laced with undisguised coldness. Theo felt it like a slap in the face. "And do you, Alan Thorn, take Marco Vost to be your husband?" Theo didn't react. After all, he wasn't Alan Thorn. The events of the past 2 weeks and his present situation felt so surreal, Theo's brain couldn't keep up. Theo was an orphan. He had spent most of his life in a children's home, where survival of the fittest was the unwritten rule by which everyone lived. He decided early on that a good education was his only way out, so he took on any work he could find, delivering newspapers, mowing lawns, grocery shopping, walking dogs, and saved every penny under a loose floorboard in the room he was sharing with 5 other boys. Unfortunately for him, a group of older boys found out he was earning money and cornered him. During the fight that followed, Theo was hit in the head with a metal bar, but he didn't back down. He was later found unconscious, clutching the few dollars he had earned that day in a bloodied fist. The encounter left Theo with a jagged scar on his forehead, just below his hairline, and with a renewed determination to build a better life for himself. For the following years, he worked hard, studied harder, put himself through nursing school, and got a job at the local hospital. His future was finally looking bright. Then, disaster struck. One day, during Theo's shift, a loud group of rich young men burst through the doors. They had been in a car accident, and one of them had injured his arm. The wound was superficial, but the young man kept wailing as if his arm had been cut off. Theo disinfected the wound and bandaged it carefully, then administered the painkiller prescribed by the doctor and went on with his duties. He didn't notice the way that young man looked at him, nor the clear calculation written all over his face. 2 days later, Theo was called to the hospital manager's office, where he found out he was being accused of malpractice and bodily harm. "Mr. Thorn filed a complaint against you, Theo," the manager said. "He has medical documentation that shows his injury was treated improperly, leading to infection and possible muscle and nerve damage that will need extensive treatment. You are hereby suspended pending investigation." Theo was stunned. "The wound was superficial. I did everything by the book. You can check the records and the doctor's notes on the case." "We will." "Theo, this hospital takes this kind of allegations very seriously, even more so considering the Thorn family gives generous donations to this hospital every year. We cannot tolerate mistakes that put patients in danger or could potentially ruin this hospital's reputation." Theo went home in a daze. When he reached his apartment, he found a man in a sharp suit waiting for him. The man introduced himself as Alan Thorn's lawyer. "Mr. Thorn has a proposition for you," the lawyer said while putting a thick stack of papers on Theo's desk. "You can either accept it or go to jail." "I didn't do anything wrong," Theo said, his voice eerily calm. "Maybe not, but by the time you manage to prove it, if you ever do, there will be no one willing to hire you. And even if you leave this city, the Thorn family will make sure you never work again. Besides, accidents happen. It would be a pity if you were to be found lying in a ditch." "Are you threatening me?" Theo felt anger bubbling in his chest. "I would never do that. Life on the streets is hard. I'm just stating facts." The lawyer had the demeanor of someone who had had this kind of conversation many times before and knew exactly when to push and when to be persuasive. "What does he want from me?" "You will take his place and marry Mr. Marco Vost next week. You will live as Alan Thorn and perform every duty as Mr. Vost's husband until Mr. Thorn decides to take his rightful place. In return, Mr. Thorn will not pursue legal action against you, and you will be able to return to your job when the time comes." Theo felt dizzy. He knew Marco Vost by reputation. Everyone knew Marco Vost, the cold, ruthless billionaire that practically owned half the city. It was said he had never forgiven nor forgotten any wrongdoing and would eliminate competition with surgical precision. He was the kind of man no one would cross, because doing so meant social and economical annihilation. "This is insane," Theo shouted, "as if Mr. Vost won't be able to tell the difference." "He might not," the lawyer replied coolly. "Mr. Thorn and you look so much alike, it's almost disturbing." He took out a photograph and placed it before Theo. It was the first time Theo really looked at Alan Thorn. It was like looking in a mirror. Same hair, same face, same body type. The only difference was in the eye colour. Alan Thorn had dark blue eyes, while Theo's were grey. They could easily swap places, and it wouldn't be noticeable unless one knew what to look for. "You have until tomorrow to decide. I will contact you in the morning," the lawyer said before leaving. The next day, Theo moved in the Thorn residence, where he received a crash course in family history, proper etiquette, and Alan's preferences. He was treated like a dog that was learning new tricks. Alan mocked him constantly. His mother, Helen Thorn, was equally disagreeable, always looking at him with cold superiority. When they noticed Theo's scar, their attitude got worse. "What can you expect from a street rat?" Mrs. Thorn scoffed. "That's disgusting. Keep it hidden. I can't have people think I'm disfigured," Alan roared. Time passed in a blur. Theo barely managed to process the amount of information being thrown at him before the wedding day came. "Mr. Thorn, do you take Mr. Vost to be your husband?" The officiant repeated the question, his voice a bit hesitant. Theo snapped back to reality. He could feel Marco Vost's piercing gaze burning his skin. "I do," he replied, his voice steady despite his trembling hands. After the papers were signed, the few people present offered their congratulations and filed out one after another. Helen Thorn played the role of the loving mother perfectly. She even asked Marco Vost, with tears in her eyes, to take good care of her beloved son. Press representatives were waiting outside to interview the newlyweds, but Marco Vost only stated that their families wished for privacy during this joyful event. There was no after-party. On their way to the Vost residence, Theo noticed Marco's clenched jaw and stiff demeanour. On arrival, he dismissed his servants, an elderly housekeeper named Beth and her butler husband John, then turned toward Theo. "I only married you because it was my father's dying wish. Do not mistake this for a relationship, nor for permission to use my name or assets. Beth and John are not your servants. They will not fetch things for you, and they will not be disrespected. They have been with my family for a long time. I will not have them mistreated by a spoiled brat. Your room is the last one on the left." Marco gestured to the corridor behind him. "If you want to eat, you will cook. If you want your room cleaned, you will do it yourself. If you want to go out, you will spend your own money. And if you ever make a fool of yourself partying or keeping lovers, like you have been doing until now, I will make sure to collect every debt your family owes, and I'll put you and your mother on the streets." Marco delivered his speech in a low, monotone voice that somehow sounded more terrifying than screaming. "We will only appear together for social functions," Marco continued. "The rest of the time, I do not wish to see you." Theo looked at Marco. For a rich kid who grew up surrounded by luxury and people tending to his every whim, what he just heard would have been terrifying. But Theo was not some pampered brat. He actually felt relief. "Fine," Theo said, then went to his room and gently closed the door behind him. Marco frowned. He had known Alan since he was a teenager. Their fathers had been longtime friends. Alan was frivolous, selfish, loud and vain, with no regard for other people. He expected him to cry, get angry, throw things, accuse him of being heartless, use his natural charm to seduce him, or throw their family connection in his face. But what he got was a calm young man who accepted his situation without a fuss. Marco felt puzzled. There was definitely something off about Alan, but he couldn't tell what had triggered this sudden change in his personality. He turned around and slowly walked to his own room, in the opposite wing of his mansion and far away from Theo. Days settled in comfortable rhythm. Theo quickly learned Marco's schedule and worked around it. Marco got up at 6 o'clock, left for his company at 7, returned at 10 p.m. and went to his room by 11. Every day was the same, like clockwork. Theo made good use of his time. Since he didn't have a laptop nor access to Marco's home office, he used the library computer to look for jobs and enroll in online courses. He couldn't return to the hospital, but that didn't mean he couldn't do something else. He took a part-time night job as a janitor. He structured his own schedule to work around Marco's. Theo worked from 12 a.m. to 4 a.m., got home by 5, slept, ate breakfast, left for the library to study, then went grocery shopping, returned home, cooked and rested, helped Beth or John to pass the time, then stood in his room until 11 p.m. and left for work again. Theo had a good relationship with Beth and John. They were weary of him at first, but slowly found that Theo had a cheerful personality and was easy to get along with. He also liked to learn new things and spent time cooking new recipes alongside Beth, or fixing things around the house with John. One evening, Marco returned home early and found Theo and Beth joking in the kitchen. When he entered, the laughter died instantly. Beth turned to the pots on the stove, and Theo grabbed his plate and was ready to leave. "There is a charity dinner tomorrow evening. We must attend," Marco spoke. "I'll come for you at 6. Theo nodded and left. "What were you talking about?" Marco asked Beth. "Master Alan was just telling me some funny stories," Beth replied, "and he's interested in my cooking." Marco's eyes narrowed. Alan was interested in cooking lessons and was joking with the staff. Did hell freeze over? Beth didn't say more, and Marco didn't push. He turned and locked himself in his study. Theo was in his room, contemplating the contents of his closet. Besides his wedding suit, there was nothing he could wear. The Thorn family didn't give him anything when they shipped him off to Marco's house. No clothing, no shoes, nothing. Theo only had his own clothes, hoodies and sweatpants, definitely not suitable for formal events. The wedding suit itself looked like a Christmas tree. It had a big brooch, ruffles, and a pair of cufflinks Theo found so ugly he thought he would go blind if he kept looking at them. "This won't do," Theo mumbled to himself. "Even the shoes are ugly. Who wears black and white snake-pattern leather shoes? What kind of sick fashion is this?" Theo found Alan's taste questionable at least. Then he got an idea. "Beth, do you have a sewing kit?" "I do, Master Alan. Do you need me to mend something for you?" Beth was a bit puzzled. "No need. I'll just borrow it for a bit. Thank you, Beth." Theo smiled at her. He took the sewing kit and went to his room, where he started to systematically tear apart the suit. He took off the brooch and cufflinks, then the ruffles, before carefully sewing the pieces back together. What he got was an understated, elegant suit. He then went on to the shoes. He used black shoe polish and rubbed it in the leather until he could no longer see the white parts, and the colour became somewhat even. Theo was pleased with the results. He put the suit and shoes back in the closet, then sneaked out of the house and went to work. The next day, Theo spent a lot of time getting ready. He had no experience with formal events and was feeling nervous. He styled his hair with great care to hide the scar on his forehead. When he was done, he almost didn't recognize himself in the mirror. Marco knocked on his door at 6 p.m. sharp. He assessed Theo's look at a glance. White shirt, black suit, black shoes, no unnecessary embellishments. "You look appropriate." "Thank you." They looked at each other for a moment. Then Marco walked away and Theo followed. The ride was quiet, but it was a comfortable silence, not the heavy atmosphere of the wedding day. Marco seemed lost in thought, and Theo didn't want to disturb him. At the venue, Marco got out of the car first, then reached out to help Theo. Theo knew all this was just for show, and since it was time for him to perform, he would definitely do it right. He took Marco's hand with a bright smile, then posed for the press. Marco kept his hand on the small of Theo's back the entire time. He skillfully guided Theo through the crowd, avoided further contact with the press, then went on to greet business partners and other acquaintances. Theo played his role, smiled, looked at Marco with loving eyes, and remained quiet unless someone addressed him. He kept the conversation minimum, vague and polite. After 2 hours of smiling and nodding, Theo felt emotionally drained. "I'll go out for some fresh air," he whispered in Marco's ear. then left without waiting for his reply. On the balcony, Theo took a deep breath and closed his eyes, using this moment of peace to clear his thoughts. "Hello, Alan." A smooth voice came from behind Theo, startling him. Theo turned around and recognized the man as Kevin Smart, a popular actor and singer who was regularly featured in tabloids. "Hello," Theo replied hesitantly. Kevin came closer and looked at Theo with undeniable longing. "You ghosted me," Kevin said. "We were so good together, and one day you disappeared. No note, no explanation, just gone." Kevin took one step closer. "It turns out you got married. It all made sense. I wasn't rich enough, nor famous enough for your taste. Of course you ditched me." Kevin's tone was self-deprecating, then turned pleading. "I don't care that you're married. Alan, I miss you too much." Kevin stretched out his hand to touch Theo's face, but Theo dodged. "What's going on here?" Marco's voice cut like a knife. Kevin's hand froze, then dropped by his side. He left without a word. Marco grabbed Theo by the arm, hard enough to leave bruises. "Is this the fresh air you needed? I warned you not to embarrass me. Yet here you are, hiding with your lover." Before Theo could say anything, a woman's scream came from inside. "Help! My father collapsed. Call an ambulance." Theo's instincts as a nurse kicked in immediately. He broke free from Marco's grasp and ran inside, where he found an elderly man fallen on the floor. He pushed through the crowd gathered around him and checked for pulse and breathing. He found no signs of life. Theo started CPR the way he had done many times before at the hospital. 30 chest compressions, 2 breaths, repeat. He didn't care about the strangers watching him. He didn't care about the noise. He didn't have time to notice Marco's eyes glued on him with a stunned expression. He only cared about the life he was trying to save. When the paramedics arrived, it was another blow for Theo. One of them was Noah, his friend and colleague from the hospital. By habit, Theo gave him a short, professional description of what had happened, then started helping before realizing what he was doing. Theo stood up abruptly and ran to the bathroom. He splashed cold water on his face and wrists, trying to keep himself from shaking. I hope Marco didn't notice that. When he got out, he heard Noah's voice. "Theo, God, it's so good to see you. Are you all right? You know, those ridiculous charges have been dropped. The manager has been trying to reach you for weeks. Where have you been hiding?" "I'm sorry, I don't know you." Theo couldn't look at Noah. He kept his head down and walked away quickly. Neither one of them noticed the tall man witnessing the scene. Back in the car, Theo could feel Marco's eyes glued on him. After a while, he couldn't take it anymore and looked at him. "What is it? You'll drill a hole in my head if you keep staring." "Where did you learn that?" Theo knew Marco was talking about him performing CPR. "At school," he answered without thinking. "At school?" Marco raised an eyebrow. Alan had been homeschooled his entire life. "My private tutor insisted on teaching some basic first aid stuff." Theo lied smoothly. "Apparently it comes in handy." Marco seemed skeptical, but didn't push. Instead, he started paying attention. Over the following weeks, he came home at odd hours to surprise Theo. He watched him interact with Beth and John. He even secretly followed him one day to the library. Marco became increasingly certain that the person he had married was not Alan Thorn. At the same time, his attitude towards Theo changed. Marco became polite, even caring, being considerate of Theo's preferences and dislikes. Theo couldn't understand the change and felt more and more uneasy. One evening, Marco came to find him in his room. "I'll be late tonight," he said. "There is an important business meeting, but tomorrow I'll take you to a party. You've been looking pale lately. A change in scenery might help." Marco's voice had lost its coldness and his eyes were warm. Theo nodded and closed the door. He sighed. It became increasingly difficult for him to sneak out at night and go to work, since Marco now kept such a close eye on him. But tonight, this wouldn't be a problem. Theo was relieved. During his shift, Theo was unexpectedly called to the conference room. It seemed that the CEO had some very important guests and someone had made a mess. Theo walked in with his cleaning trolley and froze. Among the people seated at the big mahogany table was Marco. When his eyes landed on Theo, his whole demeanor changed. His back straightened, his fists clenched, his expression turned from surprised to angry. "Don't just stand there. Come clean up this mess." The voice was sharp and commanding. Theo looked at the person speaking and recognized the young man as the CEO's son. Everyone at the company knew him as the short-tempered, badly mannered and irresponsible heir. His name was Malcolm. Theo cleaned the coffee stains from the carpet with practiced efficiency, then turned to leave. "You missed something." Malcolm's voice had a mocking edge to it. He then threw a crumpled piece of paper on the floor next to him, grinning from ear to ear. When Theo bent down to collect it, Malcolm suddenly kicked him in the face. Everyone was stunned. Theo kept his head down and walked out quickly. His head throbbed and he felt a little dizzy. "Why did you do that?" Marco was furious, but his voice was icy. "Human trash like this one need to be reminded of their place," Malcolm replied lazily. Marco's fist connected to the table with a loud thud. "We are done here." He turned to Malcolm's father. "The merger is off. People like your son don't deserve second chances. You have 2 weeks to pay your debts." When Theo returned home, he found Marco waiting for him. He took Theo's hand without a word and led him to the couch, then brought an ice bag from the kitchen and pressed it on Theo's swollen cheek. "How do you feel? Any dizziness? Nausea?" "I'm fine." Marco looked at him, worried. "How long have you been working there?" "A few months." "Why?" Theo didn't reply. Answering him honestly meant giving away the fact that he wasn't Alan, and he was too tired to come up with a reasonable lie. "I'm going to rest now. Thank you for the ice." In the afternoon, Marco came to find him. Theo's cheek was still a bit swollen, and a bruise was now visible. He was wearing the same modified wedding suit. Marco frowned. "Don't you have anything else to wear?" "I forgot to bring another suit, and I didn't go home since we got married. This is the only one I have right now." Marco looked at him strangely, then went looking for John. An hour later, John came back with a suit that fit Theo like a second skin. Marco's eyes lit up when he saw him. "Let's go!" The party was a charitable gala where jewelry was auctioned and the proceeds would later go to medical research. Marco bought a platinum wristband, placed it on Theo's wrist, and gently kissed his pulse point while looking into Theo's eyes. Theo blushed. Even if it was just for show, the gesture felt very intimate and sent chills down his spine. A photo was snapped at this exact moment. In less than an hour, the city's entire social circle talked about Marco Vost publicly showing his love for his husband. What's this? Since when are street rats allowed to attend events such as this one? Malcolm's voice cut through, interrupting the moment. "Just yesterday, weren't you on all four, cleaning carpets?" Marco tensed instantly, but Theo put his hand on his arm to stop him and calmly turned to Malcolm. The smile on Theo's face was anything but pleasant. "Yes, I was," Theo said. "I was doing research for my social studies thesis. It focuses on people's perception of social differences, specifically on how people of higher social status behave when they meet someone considered beneath them. I must say you failed spectacularly at being a decent human." Everyone was now looking at them. Malcolm's face turned beet red with anger and humiliation. "You rat!" he spat, waving a shaky finger at Theo. "Yes, you already said that," Theo replied calmly. "Is there anything else you'd like to add?" Malcolm was speechless. "Is this the young man who saved my life?" An elderly man approached Theo. Malcolm's father was holding his arm, supporting him gently. Theo instantly recognized him as the man he had previously helped. "I must apologize on behalf of my grandson," he continued. "He grew up spoiled, but it is time for him to learn how real life works." He then turned to Malcolm. "You are removed from my will, effective immediately. You no longer have our family's financial support. You will start an entry-level job and learn the value of $1. Malcolm started crying and begging his grandfather, making a scene, but the old man was unmoved. Marco and Theo left soon after. In the car, Theo fell asleep, exhausted from the events of the previous days. Marco draped a blanket over him and his gaze fell on Theo's scar. He gently caressed his forehead, then his bruised cheek, a soft smile tugging at his lips. "Theo," he whispered. "You are Theo," just as that paramedic said. Theo woke up surrounded by a comfortable warmth. He moved slightly and instantly felt something tightening around his waist. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in Marco's bed. "Don't get up," Marco whispered in his hair. "You need rest. I'll have Beth prepare your favorite meals. Don't go anywhere today." Marco kissed his forehead, then got out of bed. "I must go to the company for a couple of hours. When I return, we need to talk." He caressed Theo's cheek, then left the room. Theo heard him talking to Beth, then the front door opened and closed. The silence that followed felt heavy. Theo's heart was beating loudly against his ribs. A feeling of dread came over him. Did Marco find out he wasn't Alan Thorn? What did he want to talk about? Theo's racing thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. Unknown number. He answered, his stomach in knots. "Hello, Theo." Alan's sugary voice came through the call. "I believe it is time for you to disappear back to anonymity," Alan continued. "Come to my house." The call ended before Theo could say anything. He got dressed, then went to say goodbye to Beth. "Where are you going, Master Alan?" "Mr. Vost said you should rest until he comes back. Breakfast is almost ready. I'll be back soon. Don't worry, Beth." Theo kissed her cheek, then left. When he arrived at the Thorn residence, he found Alan with a dangerous-looking bulky man. As soon as he entered the room, the man immobilized Theo and forced him to his knees. "It seems you took your role too seriously," Alan said, pinching Theo's chin hard and forcing his head up. "Everyone is talking about the unexpected love story between the cold CEO and the Thorn family heir. It also seems I'm some sort of hero, after I saved some old man's life. Since everything turned out so well and Marco is so in love with me, I believe it's time for me to meet my husband." Alan's gaze fell on the platinum band on Theo's wrist. "I believe this is mine too." He snatched the platinum band, leaving bloody marks on Theo's wrist, then placed it on his own. "Yes, much better. It fits me perfectly." Alan looked at the bulky man. "Vince, take him away. Do what you want. I don't want to see his face again." Alan waved his hand dismissively. The man, Vince, dragged Theo to a black van, gagged him, then tied his hands and feet before throwing him inside. The ride was long. The last half an hour or so felt bumpy, as if travelling on a dirt road. When the van finally stopped, Theo was completely disoriented. He was pulled out of the van with great force. They were in front of a log cabin, in the middle of a forest. "We're going to have some fun," said Vince while carrying Theo inside. "I've always liked Alan," he continued. "Smooth skin, big eyes, soft lips, sleeps around like there's no tomorrow. I've even seen him going to bed with multiple people in one night. But no matter what I do, he never looked at me." Vince threw Theo on the bed. "You look so much like him. I'm going to pretend it's him." Vince took off his shirt. But before he could do anything else, the cabin door flew open and an enraged Marco came in, followed by several policemen. Vince was instantly overpowered and handcuffed. Marco reached Theo in 2 strides, cut his ties, and took his trembling body in his arms. "I'm sorry I'm late," he whispered, kissing Theo's hair. "It's all right now, Theo. I'll never let anyone hurt you again." Theo froze, then pulled away from Marco, eyes wide. "What did you call me?" "Theo. I called you Theo, because this is who you are." Marco gently pulled Theo back into a warm embrace. "There is no need to fear me. Come, you will understand everything when we get back." Marco guided Theo to his car, then drove him back to the Thorn residence, where they found Alan and his mother detained by police officers. When they entered the living room, Alan was whining pathetically, while Helen looked at Theo with pure hatred. "What's the matter, Helen?" Marco addressed her. "Not happy to see your nephew alive." Theo looked at him, puzzled. "What do you mean?" Marco took his hand. "It's a long story. You better sit down." After Theo found a chair for himself, Marco continued. "A As soon as I started to suspect you were not Alan Thorn, I hired a private investigator to find out the truth. His report shows that you are the true heir of the Thorn family." "Liar!" Helen Thorn howled. "Am I?" "Your twin sister, Mary, was Mr. Thorn's first wife and Theo's mother. The fact that you were insanely jealous of her was well known. In fact, you were so jealous and determined to destroy her life that you became Mr. Thorn's mistress a month after their marriage. You even became pregnant around the same time Mary did." Marco turned to face Theo. "Twin sisters giving birth to boys fathered by the same man. No wonder you and Alan look so much alike. Your mother died at birth, and Helen paid a nurse to make you disappear, then became the new Mrs. Thorn, and raised Alan as the legitimate son." Marco looked at Helen. "But he is not the heir. He's just a bastard who stole the life that belonged to another." Marco took a thick manila folder from John's hands and gave it to the police officer in charge. "This is the evidence gathered by the private investigator. Please make sure these two pay for their crimes." The room slowly emptied. Theo looked at Marco with hollow eyes. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now you take your rightful place as Theodore Thorn." Marco hesitated before continuing. "And, as my husband, if you'll have me." Tears fell from Theo's eyes. "I lied to you," he whispered. "I deceived you for so long. Why would you still want me?" "You were forced to do so," Marco replied, wiping the tears from Theo's face. "And because I came to love the man behind the mask." Marco kissed him thoroughly, a real kiss that held everything he couldn't yet fully express, and also the promise of a future that belonged only to them. After catching his breath, Theo asked, "How did you find me?" Marco looked a bit ashamed. "I received the report before the charity gala yesterday, so I had someone watching the house. When Beth told me you left, after I specifically told you to wait for me, I knew something was wrong. By the time I got home, Alan was already there ordering Beth around. He made her cry. Poor Beth. Is she all right? She is. She's waiting for you to come back home, and so do I." This time it was Theo the one who kissed Marco. "Then let's not keep her waiting." The end.